Welcome, everyone. I'm Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research at Vistage. I'm happy to host the latest webinar in our Peak Performer series. This series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community. Experts who provide exceptional insight and best practices, helping you navigate new challenges and possibilities. Our CEO Projections 2022 report revealed that hiring is the top decision and investment of CEOs and is currently the biggest challenge they are facing. The specific challenge, operations, as 72% of CEOs report they're not able to operate their business at full capacity due to talent scarcity. To get back to full capacity and meet projected customer demand, nearly 2/3 of small and mid-sized businesses are planning to expand their workforce in the year ahead. And certainly, in order to reach those workforce expansion goals, businesses need to address retention and stop the outflow at the same time as attracting new talent. As workers have more options than ever before, CEOs need to think about talent management differently, especially for high turnover roles on the front line. To help expand your perspectives on how to look at attracting and retaining hourly workers, we have invited 3 panelists, all Vistage speakers, based on their unique perspectives on this topic of hiring and retaining hourly workers. Today, we have Ryan Englin of Core Matters, who supports growing businesses, helping them address problems in hiring quality frontline employees with a focus on blue-collar industries. Susie Japs, Managing Director of Wejungo, who helps companies improve how they hire, retain, develop, and leverage top talent to accomplish their business goals. And finally, Cara, Silleto, President and Chief Retention Officer of Magnet Culture, who works with organizations to reduce unnecessary employee turnover. Welcome, everyone. In this highly competitive labor market, it's really important to think about recruiting with a marketing mindset. Ryan, let's go to you first to share your perspectives on this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You know, when you look at recruiting is not that dissimilar from the marketing that we do to attract customers. Yet we hear employers talk all the time about how they're looking for people, and they just can't find anyone. They can't find the good people, especially on the front line. And as you said, Ann, so many people have choices now. There's so many different options, even just in the last couple of years with the pandemic. So times have changed. As an employer, it's our responsibility to understand those changes and change with the times. So that's why I want to encourage everyone to stop looking for good people and really start attracting them. Attraction is what we need to think of when we put our job ads out there, when we let people know that we're hiring. We need them to be excited about the opportunity we have. It's not just another job. It's not just a paycheck. For people, they want so much more than that. And I know we've got some amazing experts here that are going to dig into that as well. So I'm going to focus just on one tiny area today, and that is the job ad. You know, if you want to attract better employees, you have to think about what you're using to lure them in. We're going to hear today about some fishing analogies, and that's really how I want people to think about it. We're not out there hunting people. We're not out there catching people as fast as we can. We have to attract them into our business. So what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about the job ad and give you some real good tips, some things that we're seeing work in the marketplace right now to let people know, hey, this is different. This sounds like a company I want to be a part of. Now, I know what a lot of people are probably thinking right now, well, nobody reads the ads anyways. I get all these applications. I call people, they don't even remember applying. And while that might be true for a subset of them, I know that the right people are going to take the time to read your ads. So what I'd love to do is share with you an ad right now that I pulled off of Indeed. It's not my ad, it's somebody else's. So when you look at this next slide and you see this ad, this is very common in the marketplace right now. This is what we see. It's what we're about. It's all about the company. It's all about the employer. We're safety. We seek individuals of character, and we will relentlessly seek greatness. And it's we all over themselves. And the problem with that is job seekers don't care. They really don't care. They want to read your ad and they want to know, what's in it for me? How are you different than the last 17 employers I had that all treated me like garbage and didn't care? that I had a personal life, that I had challenges in my personal life, or that I had hopes and dreams and goals that they spent no time working with. Now, I'm not saying that you have to become some Nirvana type company and you have to put all this stuff out there, but every single employer has a great story to share. And they've got a great team in that company. And if we can take those things and put them into the ad, people are going to be much more drawn to you. You probably heard this before. People don't leave jobs, they leave managers. More than 2/3 of job seekers say, when I'm looking at a job ad, will you just tell me who I'm going to be working for? Like, is my boss going to be the same crazy Yahoo I just left? Or is it going to be someone that's actually going to invest in me? And we talk a lot about millennials. There's a ton of data about millennials. They all want to be invested in. They want training. They want opportunities. They want people to invest in them. So I took this ad, and I'm just going to give you a quick example of how we rewrote this one section. Notice it's a little bit more of a narrative. Now, there'll be people that argue, oh, if you don't have a lot of bullet points in your ad, people are just going to skim it. They're not going to look at it anyways. And what we found is the bullet points have become commonplace. It's what everybody sees now. So if you have lots of bullet points, your ad looks just like everybody else's. And we really want you to stand out. So, I mean, even just this second line here, safety is a top priority for us. I mean, they said that before, but it's not the over the top, you can't get your job done safety, but the kind that makes sure you and everyone around you gets home safely at the end of the day. I mean, that's what safety is about, especially in the trades. It's not like we do safety because we're scared of OSHA or because that's what we think we need to do. We do safety because you've got a family at home and we care about that. And that's important to us. It's saying pretty much the same thing the last slide said. The difference here is we wrote it from the job seeker's perspective. What do they want? Here's the other thing. We spend a lot of time talking about rock stars. You know, everybody wants to hire that rock star employee or that A player, that top performer. Here's the truth about top performers. They do not want to work on a team full of B and C players. If I'm a rock star and I know it, and there's a lot of lip service about how you hold people accountable and you know, everybody's got their scorecards and their metrics, but excellence isn't recognized. Again, we took that same comment they had on the last slide and we just made it about the employee. So if I'm a rock star and I know it and excellence is recognized, valued, and rewarded, I get more excited about that because I think maybe my team is going to be the same way. I'm not going to be that A player that's carrying the load of the rest of the team because there's a bunch of B and C players just getting by. And then finally, the last one is everybody tells me right now, well, it's all about pay. The only way to get good people is to raise wages. Now, if you're still paying $7 or $8 an hour, yeah, it's about pay. But most people aren't. Most people know what the market bears, and you don't have to compete on pay. People want more than the money. Remember, money is a means to an end. So when we talk about it, make sure that you highlight what it is about your company that's different. And that's what we did in this last sentence here. You know, we know that high pay is often a way to get you to overlook poor treatment, poor management, or lousy culture. We don't pay that because we know you'll stay here because of how well you're treated. And it just flips the script for job seekers. So I want to share some stats with you real quick. This is something to consider. We spend a lot of energy in sourcing right now. Everybody's just like, I need more applications. And I've never met an employer that said, I'd take 100 applications that I have to filter through to find that one that I want to hire. What they'd rather do is they'd rather have a dozen applications and there's one or two in there that they want to hire. So we always focus on quality. And here's the truth. You're going to get the majority of your applications from the job boards. And just right around 1% of hires are going to come from those job boards. And that doesn't even speak to your ability to retain the people coming from the job boards. Right now, unemployment is an all-time low. The people that are unemployed right now, the ones that are on the job boards, that's where they go. They may not be the most employable. They may not be the most engaged. That's why we hear people complain all the time right now. I schedule interviews and people ghost me. They don't show up. Well, those aren't the kind of people you want to be hiring anyways. What you want to do is you want to focus on those passive job seekers. More than 70% of the job market is passively looking for work. And what that means is they're going home and they're talking to their friends and their family. They're doing their own research. They're following you on social media. They're watching you on YouTube. And they're learning about the company from afar before they make a decision. And then most people are going to look and say, who do I know that works there? And ask for an intro in. And then finally, the last stat, 86% of millennials will take a pay cut to work at a place whose mission and values align with their own. So for those of you thinking, oh, culture is not that important, nobody cares, people care. So really focus on the culture. And that leads me to my last slide, which is really helping you understand the types of experiences that people have when it comes to your company. You know, Anne had mentioned that we take a marketing approach to this because I believe that recruiting is a marketing function. And just like your marketing team, they focus on that brand experience, your website, your vehicle wraps, your logos, your social media presence. It's what people see. And if that brand experience looks good, it's going to draw people in. And they're going to get to experience that customer experience that you've created for them. But that's why your customers are there. You see, but if you don't have a solid employee experience, if the core of this apple is rotten, the whole apple is rotten. It still might have a great skin because they polished it and they put some chemicals on it. But at the end of the day, if we don't take care of our employees, if we don't create an excellent experience for them, there's no opportunity for them to create a great customer experience. And in today's day and age of reputation management and review websites, your customers can take care of your brand experience for you. So I want you to start thinking about recruiting as a marketing activity. Get your marketing team involved and write better job ads that are more compelling and focus on what the job seekers want the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I have some questions for you and comments, and I will save that until the end. Next, we're going to hear from Susie, who is going to go a little bit deeper. So Ryan shared with us some great insights about attracting. Susie, can you help us understand some best practices for selection?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. For most companies, their greatest single constraint on growth will always be their ability to hire great people. So over the next 10 minutes together, we're going to learn how to fish by covering key areas of hiring that will change the way you think about recruiting and interviewing hourly workers, like how to find the best talent. Let's get creative, improve interviewing, focus on the do's, see metrics, the numbers do matter, and hear feedback, how to listen closely. Now, the most common hiring belief I hear on a weekly basis from companies is there are no good candidates out there. Well, we know from Ryan, this is not true. They are out there, but we have to get better at finding and attracting them. And Ryan really did a great job covering how to attract them. So let's talk about how to find the best talent. And I'll start with a pest control company of 60 employees we worked with in 2021. Now, their recruiting challenge was that they were not getting enough qualified applicants to fill their 15 open technician positions. They were posting on Craigslist because that is what worked for them in 2019, but it wasn't working for them in 2021. Their job ads were attracting maybe 10 to 15 applicants per posting and none were ever on the mark. So the CEO asked me, should we be posting on LinkedIn? And I told him, don't assume that LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter, Indeed, and job boards are the best places to recruit for your hourly positions. If your job ad is not bringing in the right applicants, ask yourself these questions. First, do I have the right job title? Is my job ad compelling? We know from Ryan, you need to be able to provide a WIFM, right? So do you have a WIFM? And am I fishing in the right pool where I can access the best candidates? I then told him, let's get creative in your recruiting approach to find candidates. And that is my tip number one for all of you when finding candidates is to get creative. Many business leaders have asked me, how do I know if I should post on a job board or not? So before you pay hundreds of dollars on job boards, first look at the candidate profiles and resumes in that job board database to see if the types of candidates you are looking for are actually going to be on that job board, like a LinkedIn or Indeed. Second, I want you guys to test the posting out for 2 weeks. Look at what is the data telling you. For example, if you get 45 applicants and 2 are on the mark, I would tell you that 4% return is not good and that there is probably a better thing that you can do, right? But what if you've got now 20 applicants and 10 are on the mark? Then I would say 50% return is pretty good, and you're likely fishing in a better pool. So with that pest control company, we did research first and went to the LinkedIn board and searched technician profiles that fit their criteria in the region. And guess what? There were 19 profiles. 19, that's it. So LinkedIn was definitely not the place for them to post. They were also posting on Craigslist, and they looked at the results and said, okay, over the last 90 days, we've gotten 112 applicants. We received, 16 that looked good enough to interview. We hired 2. Unfortunately, one of those 2 had already been fired early on. So if job boards weren't the right recruiting source for them, then what is? And I said, let's get creative. We knew that technicians needed a license to work with chemicals, and they were not willing to hire hourly techs without that licensure. So we went to 2 places you could get the certification in their region and found out that one of those sites had a directory of every single technician that was certified. Bingo, that was the jackpot. Now we had the best talent pool. So we then made sure they had a compelling outreach message, a with them job ad, and an effective recruiting approach. The result was they were able to hire 16 technicians in a 2-month period. Now, another client, a Finnish carpentry client, was looking to hire carpenters, and the typical job boards were not attracting the right candidates. So I said, let's get creative, and we did. We spent time to get to know their current carpenters to find out, where do they hang out? What are their interests? Where would they go to find a job? And guess what we learned? The trend amongst all of them was that they all went to swap meets on the weekends. Right, that's so interesting. So we suggested to our client, let's pilot it and go for 1 weekend and recruit. Be ready to interview candidates on the spot and see what they come up with. The first weekend, they ended up hiring 1 carpenter. So they invested in recruiting 5 weekends in a row and ended up filling their 3 open positions. Next, we have a client in the hospitality space who every busy season needs to triple their volume of hires for their entry-level desk and hourly housekeeper positions. Now, the traditional recruiting method of posting on job boards were giving them many applicants. But once those applicants were hired, they discovered quickly they weren't the right hires. That hospitality client had a 1-step, 30-minute interview before hiring their hourly workers. I showed them their recruiting approach, though it saved them time by being quick, it was resulting in a high number of bad hires and constant turnover every month. I reminded them that though their front desk and housekeeper positions were hourly positions, they should put just as much intention and thoroughness in interviewing and assessing those hourly hires as they would a higher level position. Now, to date, you guys, I've observed hundreds of interviews, and most interviewers ask open-ended behavioral questions. Behavioral questions are the most commonly used, and they sound like, tell me about a time you didn't get along with someone, or tell me about a time you made a mistake. Behavioral questions are not my favorite and do not actually predict performance. Here are my 2 issues with behavioral questions. The first, a candidate can practice, they can prep, and they can give canned responses to these types of questions. The second reason I don't like behavioral questions is the answer they give you focuses on how they did something at a different company, with a different culture, under different expectations. Instead, I want you guys to focus on your company's situation, what you expect that person to accomplish, and hearing how they think, problem solve, and how they would instead do something in your specific position. So my tip number 2 is in an interview, I want you to focus on the do's over the haves, the do's instead of the haves. You can do this with work exercises, situational questions, and role plays. For many clients, we have created work exercises that occur on site during interviews. And this allows hiring managers to focus on the do's of how a candidate thinks, acts, reacts, and performs before they are hired. Some examples are, for a hospitality client, their housekeeper candidates are actually paid to clean alongside a housekeeper for 2 hours during their interview. For a plumbing client, we put their customer service reps through realistic customer role plays. For a food processing client, we have candidates interview in the freezing cold climate that they would need to work in so they understand the challenges of the job. Can you imagine the breadth of information these three companies are collecting and observing with candidates during those interviews? It's powerful. Now, Ryan mentioned you need to start with the employee experience in mind. And I'm guessing many companies here don't have exciting high-tech jobs and are not in the sexiest industries. But none of the companies I've mentioned so far today have either, right? It might surprise you to hear that the working exercises embedded in the interview process are for the candidate's benefit also. And those exercises do increase engagement and interest levels of your best candidates and rule out the misfits before a hire is made. The interview process must be engaging and effective, but also done efficiently. And the best way to know what's working or not working is be efficient. So my tip number 3 is to see metrics. By keeping an eye on 3 metrics, they will help improve how you recruit, interview, and hire. Now, most companies, if they're measuring any hiring results, are focused on metrics like time to fill or cost of a hire. I tell our clients the right data matters, but you have to target that data and it will tell you a story and help you dictate where to put your time and money with recruiting. Now, let's take a look at one metric I recommend you track. It's called pass-through rates. So this is a hiring funnel from one of our electrical subcontractor clients. As you can see, it's like a sales funnel where you'd track leads to figure out how many leads you need to close a sale. Well, here we're tracking how many applicants you need to fill a position. In this particular situation, we measured the results and found it was taking 72 applicants before they filled one position. That is too much, you guys. So they need to improve their recruiting approach. The next metric to look at, the second one, is called time spent. This is where we're keeping track of how much time a resume and applicant sits in the hiring process, and it allows a company to identify bottlenecks in the process, real time. For example, for a manufacturing client of ours, a handful of hourly positions were taking 90 plus days to fill. After we tracked that, we saw there was a bottleneck. As you can see here, it's the hiring manager review. The hiring manager was taking 2 weeks to give feedback. By the time feedback was given, candidates were no longer available. Fixing this one bottleneck alone saved them so much time, they were able to reduce the time to fill from 90 plus days to less than 45. Now, for 95% of the companies we work with, we discover they aren't tracking the quality of hires. My guess would be that's true for most companies in this room as well. And that is the most important metric, you guys. So we want you to track the quality of hire at 30, 60, 90, 180 days, and then track it back to where did that person actually come from. So here you can see on this slide, this is a home care company that hires hourly care attendants. As you can see here, we found that the source of their best candidates were employee referrals, but they had no employee referral program. Jackpot. This is something they can improve in their recruiting immediately. Now, lastly, I have one more bonus tip for you as we move into Cara's section on retention. We have a construction client who we met 2 years ago, and for years prior, they had been doing annual employee surveys. The CEO, Bill, had told me when we first met, Susie, we're doing good at sharing the results. We make changes, but every year we lose some of our top performers, and I don't know why. So I asked Bill, have you ever created 2 groups of surveys with the same questions, your top performers in one group and everyone else in the other group, then compare the results? Wow, no, I've never considered doing that, Bill said. So I told Bill to send out the survey and keep it simple by asking just 3 questions. Why did you join? Why do you stay? And what can we do to improve? They've done this for 2 years and have found each time that the survey results have been vastly different between their top performers and the rest of the employee base. So my final tip here is not all employees are created equal. So listen closely to the feedback that matters most.
Susie, that was fantastic. And I have a lot of questions for you. I'm sure our other panelists do as well. For our attendees, please submit your questions as we will have a formal Q&A in the end after a conversation. So I think that bonus tip was a great segue to Cara. So Cara, welcome. And let's close this with your perspectives on getting retention right.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much to Ryan and Susie for great strategies on the attraction side. And I myself have questions as well. So I look forward to that time. I will have to say, as a retention expert, and I believe that Ryan and Susie agree with this as well, that the first step is get retention right internally because I've never seen a situation where recruiting fixed a retention problem. Okay. Now, of course, we need to recruit. And yes, we need to follow everything they just taught you to recruit better and more efficiently, more effectively. But if we have a staffing issue, staffing stability issues and whatnot, then we can't solve it by only fixing and focusing on recruiting side of things. Okay. So the best recruiting tactic that we have ever seen is to improve your retention and to get things right internally. We're talking about the understanding your culture and making sure that you're putting that in the forefront of the attraction and recruiting side of things. It really does help when we create a better place to work. Okay. So let's talk for a moment about who the flight risk is and what really keeps people at organizations. A lot of people mistakenly they equate the same thing of longevity with loyalty. And longevity at a company, just because someone has been there for a long time, does not mean that they are actually loyal to the company. Because I see a lot of folks who've been in a company a long time, and maybe they're sitting on a big old cushion of paid time off, right? They've got 3 or 4 weeks banked, and that person is not willing to leave and go on to the next organization because they don't want to lose that cushion that they have. They honestly don't really love their job or love who they work for or love what they do every day, but they have that comfort zone that they don't want to walk away from. So then you have new hires come in and work with some of these folks who have been there a long time and are deemed loyal, but maybe have a negative attitude, or maybe they just don't like change. Have you ever heard people say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't? Well, that's somebody who absolutely prefers to stay in their comfort zone than to change for possible improvement, okay? Because they think, well, it could be worse if we go somewhere else. Where a new hire coming in, hello, they think, if this isn't great, I bet it's better somewhere else, right? I bet the grass is greener somewhere else. So a lot of that mentality comes down to how folks were raised and what they think about change, how comfortable they are with change. And so sometimes people stay for a long time because they're loyal. Other times people do not stay because of loyalty. They stay because of golden handcuffs or because they really hate change. So what we have found, even though I happen to be a millennial myself, I was born in the 80s, believe it or not. And so I absolutely can be loyal. It's not that I can't be loyal, but it is instead a factor of the management. Just like Ryan said earlier, we don't leave the company, we leave the managers. And so who am I reporting to? What is my team like? What do they say to each other? How do they treat each other? Because I'll tell you right now, culture is not posters on a wall. All right. Culture is what is walking down the hall. It's how people talk to each other. Is there trust? How do we feel about the work that we do and who we do it with? Okay. So when we talk about what keeps people, it's not about even generational dynamics. Everyone sometimes labels the younger folks, they have no loyalty, they have no commitment. But we have found it's actually every single new hire that is a flight risk. So I don't care whether you're hiring a 25-year-old or a 45-year-old, they are the same flight risk because they left their last company to come to you. And they absolutely have the guts and the willingness and the risk tolerance to leave your organization and go on to the next shiny opportunity. Okay. So let's just not pin all of that disloyalty onto the younger generation right now. Now, one of our clients is a concrete group. They do the ready mix, and they, of course, have trouble recruiting and retaining the drivers. So when we went and talked to management, why do you think people quit? They said 2 things. Better schedules, better pay. That's it. That was it. He said, oh, everybody they'll leave for $1 more an hour. I got that over and over and over again. Then we went and talked to the drivers and get this, totally different answers that they gave for why they left their last job to come here or why they're considering quitting to go on to another opportunity. One, they said, there's no staff meetings. there's no communication with us out in the field. We don't know what's going on. We're the last ones to hear everything. So are you connecting with your people, especially if you have third shift or second shift workers? Do they feel like they're the last ones to find out everything because they're not in the building or even working the same time that the management is? Okay. Big deal for those folks. Also, they said the bosses were degrading and played favorites. One truck driver said, "I'd really prefer to be called by my name, not my truck number. Thank you very much." And so, yeah, absolutely, just a basic, a fundamental. And yet, anytime I speak or train with groups that are especially primarily male, and especially groups that are, a lot of truck drivers, a lot of tradesmen, things like that, they laugh when I say they want to be called by their name and not their truck number. And they don't realize how degrading that can make people feel, because that's how it's always been. Oh yeah, hey, 42, come on, let's go, right? So it's just been a part of the culture in the past. And some managers have even said, well, we're hiring so many people, I can't keep up with everybody's names. So that's why I have to use their truck numbers. Is that a manager that people want to work for, that he can't even remember, or she can't even remember all of her people's names, let alone getting to really know your people and knowing their significant others' names or their children's names and what sports and activities and hobbies they have? Okay. So we have to realize that people want to work for folks who really care about their people and who communicate very, very effectively with their people. Now, this other one was really eye-opening for me. And they actually said, the truck you get as a rookie is a joke here. And that they're very hierarchical with seniority-based cultures. So the longer you've been at the organization, this is very traditional, very typical. For decades, we did this successfully. The longer you've been there, you get first dibs, right? You get first dibs on your shift, your equipment, the job you want to do, that type of thing. But now, who's the flight risk? Does anyone remember 3 minutes ago? The flight risk is the new hires. All right. So we need to take care of those new hires and really protect and shield the new hires to some extent. Make sure they're not being hazed. Make sure they're not getting the grunt work or the crap equipment or the crap leftover shift that nobody else wants, because they see the opportunity. Again, they have the wherewithal to walk away because everybody's hiring today. Okay. So we have to make sure that we've created a place where people want to work. We're communicating effectively. We've got the right kind of management in place in supervisory and management roles, and that we're treating those new hires and handling onboarding in a really effective way. Okay. That we're not making anyone feel like a second-class citizen. Even with traditional phrases, be very careful with things like, you have to pay your dues, or you need to wait your turn, rookie. Any of that kind of language that's happening is causing unnecessary turnover. Doesn't mean that people don't have to earn their stripes and pay their dues in some way, but our new workforce is much more egalitarian instead of very hierarchical as we've been traditionally. Egalitarian just means we all bring value to the organization. We are all needed for this company to run successfully. So we cannot act like or ever say the folks who've been here longer are any more important than the folks who haven't. Okay. We have to treat everyone with respect and treat everyone as extremely valuable within the organization. All right. So next up is management. We must invest in our managers. Okay. So we have created program after program after program as we find gaps in where management has been promoted or hired into supervisory and leadership positions, but they haven't been given the tools to be successful. Do your supervisors and managers understand the millennial mindset? Do they understand why the younger generations truly are more entitled and have less traditional loyalty? I can answer all of that, by the way. It isn't, it's facts. It's the way we were raised. It is transitions in our society over all of this time. And so have you provided the appropriate communication skills, emotional intelligence skills, retention, focus training to really make sure that folks are given those tools that they need to understand, attract, and retain today's new workforce, which is so different than it was, especially in the late 1900s. Okay, totally different workforce than where we were just a couple decades ago. So I encourage you, for those of you who do have particularly a lot of hourly workers, we need to acknowledge that the market moving forward is much different than the market looking backward. And what I mean is we don't have pensions. We don't have guarantees and promises. People are not going to work at the same company forever for their whole career. And so I'm working with a lot of senior leaders right now to figure out, what does operationalizing turnover mean? We operationalize our deliverables, right? The products that we make, the services we provide, we operationalize that. We make it a well-oiled machine, right? We want to find those bottlenecks and build efficiency and whatnot. And so I encourage you to figure out, what is your forever turnover rate? And it's not as low as you would like it to be, but it's something more realistic, and figure out what that forever turnover rate is going to be. And then let's build that well-oiled machine with the tips that Ryan and Susie have talked about, with better recruiting, better attraction. And then we need to do better onboarding, have the checklists in place, and a well-oiled machine for those new hires coming in. Okay. So we have to operationalize, what does that look like in the future, so we can stabilize our budgets, really, is the primary reason. So we quit having all of these ups and downs. Okay. So we have a ton of resources available at magnetvault.com, including a cost of turnover worksheet and ebooks about emotional intelligence and millennials and all kinds of fun stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that you have access to some retention resources whenever you're ready to make that focus. All right. So thanks so much. And back to you, Ann.
Excellent. So many questions I have, but first I want to bring everyone back together and give you all the opportunity to just add some comments, questions, perspectives on what your other fellow speakers shared. So Ryan, I'll go to you first. Anything to add to what Susie and Cara just shared?
I took a lot of notes myself. I have some questions too, but I thought that so much of it was in alignment with what we coach and teach at Core Matters. And I thought that the questions you ask in the interview are so critical, what Susie was talking about. We see people default to the questions. I'm not kidding you. I have a Pinterest board of all the infographics that tell you how to answer the where do you want to be in 5 years and why did you leave your last job and hundreds of little infographics and memes that job seekers use to study those. They really want to know. You can Google it, these questions that people ask. So I love that Susie had more of the do versus the have. Like, what are you going to do for us? And how would you approach this situation? I thought that was fantastic. And then Cara, I loved all of the feedback on, or the information on why people leave. Like, you have to remember something, and I share this a lot, is looking for work is one of life's most stressful events. It gets right up there with death of a loved one and a health diagnosis and relocation. It's on that list, looking for work. People don't want to do this willingly for $1 more an hour. They do it when the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. So I thought that was great information there, Cara.
All right, Susie, any comments on Cara's thoughts on retention?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's so powerful to say something that is so basic, but it's to really invest in your managers. And I know that actually, even though it's simple to say, is a little bit overwhelming to a lot of companies. So I would say just start small and just like Cara said, and find out, what matters to people, because what you think matters to them probably isn't actually accurate, which she showed very well in her talk. And then I would also just add, understand your employee shelf life. How long do you need someone to stay for? And that will be different depending on the positions and the levels you have. That also will dictate your recruiting approach. And then I just wanted to comment too on how important I think Ryan's piece was on just even like the job ad, which is really your starting point to attracting talent. As he mentioned, it's about speaking to their persona. It's about having a conversation through the job ad and really looking at from an attraction standpoint, not typical job ad. And the more detailed you are, just like Ryan said, I think the more accurate you're going to get of applicants, the better applicants, hopefully reduce actually the quantity you're getting, because only the people who spent the time to read it and care and felt engaged by your compelling job ad will then apply. So I think Ryan's talk was so critical to remember.
Fantastic. All right. And Cara, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to eliminate the word recruiting from my vocabulary now, and I'm only going to call it attraction because you're exactly right, Ryan, that it's all about attraction. And it really made me realize that a lot of organizations, when they ask us, how do we recruit better or retain better and things, I have to ask them, how sexy are you? I mean, really, because if you have rigid schedules that are, unbending, and you haven't trained your managers, which means you still have people saying things like, I shouldn't have to thank my people for showing up. That's why they get a paycheck. If we still have those kind of managers in place, that's not attractive. The lack of flexibility is not attractive. How's trust going around the organization? That's not attractive. If people don't trust each other, there's backstabbing, there's hazing, things like that. And the big one right now that I'm talking to so many groups about is the workloads. How attractive is the workload that you're offering people, especially if you're short staffed, which means as soon as they come on board, they're already behind and have to do more. So I love that Ryan focused on, how attractive are you really? And then how do you become more attractive in that way? Absolutely. And then with Susie, the bottlenecks. We have overloaded managers and added this title that we call them hiring managers, which is, I'm sorry, but it's a bit of a cop-out of having a proper HR staff and proper recruiting and proper teams. We just say, well, managers just have to hire their own people and handle that. But just like you saw on her chart, it was 34 or 37% of the time is an application sitting on a hiring manager's desk waiting to be scheduled or waiting to be interviewed. And so I would highly recommend, again, back to operationalizing, look for the bottlenecks in your recruiting process and in your retention process. Look for the bottlenecks, increase the capacity, just like we do with operations, and get more throughput on that stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Cara. I know that we've been talking a lot about the need for speed, right? There's a lot of opportunities out there. Workers have a lot of choices. And tell me a little bit more about, how timely and jumping on a qualified candidate is important.
No, I'll let Ryan answer that.
I'll tell you
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
So I ask employers all the time, which is easier to get right now, a new customer or a new employee? And they'll all tell me, hands down, it's way easier to get a new customer. And I say, how long would you let your sales team sit on a new lead before you were all over them?
Right.
And the answer, I've never heard anybody say more than 15 minutes. I go, that's your answer. That's how fast you need to get back to them. Now, I still believe in the hire slow, fire fast. There's a lot of people right now that are pushing this hire fast, fire fast, but I still think you need to slow down the process. But what I want people to know is you compress the amount of time from when they apply to when you make the offer. So don't say, oh, we'll get back to you next week, or, hey, can we interview you in 3 days? Compress the amount of time, but when you have them in front of you, spend the time with them, but fast, 5 minutes. We have one client that he made a game of it. with him and his team who could respond faster, and they had it down to 3 minutes from the time the application came in.
That's awesome. You know, one of my clients actually got their multi-week from application to start clocking hours. They got that down from weeks down to 48 hours. And this was actually a senior care organization that hires a lot of lower wage hourly workers. And if you think about it, they have to do drug screening, background checks, lots of hurdles they have to get through. And they realized because they had those extra hurdles that other industries didn't have, they couldn't wait for that information to come back. So they started hiring people. I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but it gets them the candidates that they need quickly. And so they started hiring people and start clocking their hours within 48 hours of interviewing. And what they did is they said, we're still going to drug screen. We're still going to do your background check. And if anything comes back negative, you better tell us now, you know, that it's going to come back negative, because what they do is they start their training. Yeah, they can't go out on the floor. They can't do their job yet until those things come back, but they can go ahead and start the onboarding process, let them shadow in some cases. And so that's how they're competing with the industries that are moving faster. To Ryan's point, you still want to put a lot of steps in place so that you hire the right people. You just want to compress the timeline, and you want to do that part faster so there isn't the waiting game in between. Because a lot of these hourly workers, if we're honest and we know who they are, many of them have already quit their last job and they need to start today. They don't want to start 2 or 4 weeks from now when your next orientation is. They need to clock hours tomorrow.
Cara, just because you brought up that particular industry, we did have a question that came in from the registration. Is there any advice on industries such as nursing homes and assisted living, where the competition for hourly workers is fierce? If they have a lot of different options, I think you might have just answered this with getting there quickly. Any other recommendations specific to that industry?
Yeah, so no offense to my friends that I serve in manufacturing and construction and whatnot, but who has a better mission than senior care? You know, I mean, as far as the attraction and being able to put out there that you're going to become family with these residents that you serve who live in our buildings, right? I do a ton of work in senior care, and I think the mission driven side is a huge plus. And I know a lot of those organizations are putting that front and foremost, but even that's how they compete against hospitals. Hospital nurses, you don't see the same patient twice. But in a nursing home, you're going to be living with those folks right there every shift, the same folks every single time. And so, yeah, focusing on the mission, that work, and again, building the trust, building the team camaraderie, and getting onboarding right. With industries who've been really hard hit by the pandemic, most of them cut their onboarding either completely or just back to the bare bones compliance. And we've got to get back into, I think Susie was saying, you know, we have to talk about who we are and why we do what we do, and put that out there and make sure that's covered in orientation. If you just shove them out on the floor or out in the field, if it's construction or manufacturing, right, you just shove them out there with very little orientation on who we are, they're not going to build any trust with you and build that meaning and the connection to the mission.
Yeah, that brings me to Susie, your the pipeline and the metrics, you know, tracking the amount of time, the number of candidates, things like that. Do you have any advice if you're hiring for someone who was already employed, who might need to have some sort of 2-week notice? Are there things that you would recommend doing between that acceptance of the offer and the first day to make sure that they're going to show up?
Yes. So it's absolutely communication. So I would say you actually create intentional touch points between when they've accepted the offer and when they start. One is to actually have a nice, like, 1 week onboarding like calendar that you send to them during that period to get them excited. They also will probably ask you questions, which increases that communication. And then I always like to suggest setting up somebody like who's going to either be a mentor or a partner for the first 30 days and get them introduced to that person soon and get that on the calendar for a lunch. The more the person gets engaged and commits to all these little steps, even before they start, increases the likelihood that they're going to show up to a job and be engaged.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I have one thing to add. We coach all of our clients. Not everybody is unemployed when they get there, and sometimes they have to turn in notice. And like I said, looking for work is tough. We talked about the grass not being always greener and people being really hesitant to make this change. So one of the things that is just so easy for the new employer to do is when you're making the offer and you're having the conversation with the candidate, ask them when they're going to turn in their notice. Give them a little rah moment. Say, oh, I'm going to turn in my notice on Monday at 7 o'clock. At 6:30, set your calendar and shoot them a quick text. We're rooting for you. Good luck with the conversation. Can't wait to have you start. Something as simple as that can go a long ways to starting off on a really solid foundation with them. And now they know you're engaged. They know you're still excited. Because what do most employers do? We'll see you in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks goes by and the person shows up and like, oh, we don't have your truck ready. We don't have your uniforms ready. Your I-9's not back yet, but we're glad you're here. But just that little thing, and then follow through, and at noon, shoot them another text, how'd the conversation go? Can't wait to have you here. Just those 2 little text messages, takes you 3 seconds, can go a long ways to making sure people show up.
Yeah, I love that. Susie, we had a question come in for you. Can you give examples on focusing on the do's instead of the haves, specifically when hiring customer service reps, maybe examples of the role playing during that kind of interview process?
Sure. So a lot of times when we are working with clients on customer service roles, we'll see them really focus on like years of experience or, okay, they've worked with our clients. So again, the checklist of haves. I would say focus on the do's. How does somebody actually execute? As a customer service rep, you want someone who's empathetic, who listens, who's patient, and who can deal with conflict. And you need to be able to actually see how they do that versus just, ask, can you do that? Have you done it before? So for example, for a plumbing company, we actually created a role play where the person would actually, as they're in the office, be on the phone. A call would come in. It's not a real one, but it would be the manager in a different room who would then simulate, if you will, the situation of an angry customer, one who said, hey, listen, you guys said you're going to be out here today. Now you're telling me the plumber can't be out here until tomorrow. What am I supposed to do? And be able to see how they handle it. They did give them some talking points and a script, but not to be able to handle every little thing that the customer is going to say. And the goal here is not to focus on the candidate getting it 100% right, because they're not going to. They've not done this job with your company before. It's to gauge what's the learning curve that this person's going to have. Where am I going to need to coach them? How are they handling conflict? The things that you can't really teach someone to be, like a good listener, patient, empathetic. Do they have that naturally? What do we have to work with? So think of like all these different situations that you can create that are real life and put that candidate in that situation. It not only helps you assess them, but it helps them get a better idea of the job and if they actually want to do that job or not.
Very cool. I know that Patrick Lencioni, when he came and talked to the Vistage community, talked about non-traditional interviews, taking someone outside of a traditional, we're going to sit across the table, and just seeing how they engage in a real world situation. So that's a great theme and variation, digging much deeper into the specific role. Ryan, I had a question for you. In terms of attracting, I love how you flipped the we to you, and so so many occurrences of the word you. What are your thoughts about featuring current employees in outreach to maybe help people see themselves in some sort of testimonial?
Absolutely. And that's another question I ask employers all the time. How many of you have customer testimonials? And every hand in the room goes up. How many have employee testimonials? And when you get to blue collar in the trades, most of them never even heard of Glassdoor, which for those of you that don't know is owned by Indeed, who happens to be the largest job board in the planet. And they've never even heard or even thought about getting their employees involved. So something as simple as asking your employees to just grab their phone. Everybody's got a camera today. Like, you don't need a video crew to do this, and get a quick employee testimonial and share it on social, share it on YouTube, put it on your careers page. Absolutely. And a lot of job boards will pull the videos out, but link to your careers page and have those employee testimonials there so they can see, wow, this is real people. I trust them more than I trust the employer who has an agenda, right? Which is they're short-staffed and they need people. So absolutely get your employees involved.
Okay. I think that's especially helpful in, especially if someone's focused on recruiting in diversity, if people can see faces like themselves as well. We haven't really talked about the fact, like the need or desire for diversity in hiring, especially in a tight labor market. So do any of you have any perspectives on that?
I will just say real quick, an actual fun exercise that I've done with clients, whether it's in HR or it's a hiring manager themselves, is when reviewing resumes, actually like wipe off the name, because the names are really telling. There's a lot of bias behind that. And so I think that first off helps start to bring in a little bit more diversity. And then also just be clear on what diversity are you looking for. So for example, we have a family office and they're actually all African-American. So for them, diversity for them would be non-African-American people. And their concern is, well, now that we all are, like, would anyone want to come and work with us? Because now, like, we're the majority. And I think that a lot of companies have that, but the idea of diversity or the vision of it, it looks very different, right? It could be a woman, it could be someone of a different educational background. There's lots of different parts of diversity. So define that first before you like go on this idea of we're going to be more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
I think one easy baby step is think about who you're mentoring, because so often we mentor people who look and think like we do. We're drawn to someone younger that reminds us of ourselves. Oh, she reminds me of me when I was her age. And so I tended for years to mentor younger white females. And then it was brought to my attention years ago that if we want more diversity in our candidate pools, in our talent pipeline, that we as leaders within our professions have to be mentoring people who don't look and think like we do. So look at the books on your bookshelf of who are you reading? Is that diverse? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Is that diverse? Who are you networking with? And then most importantly, for the future of our pipeline, are you mentoring people outside of maybe the comfort zone that you've been in the past, and proactively mentoring people of different genders, different generations, different race, different religion, different upbringing, all of those things.
Okay, we have time for one last question. And unfortunately, I could probably talk to all of you all day. The insights have been tremendous, and specifically how you've honed them down to those hourly frontline workers and industries. We have heard a lot of small, mid-sized businesses say they're challenged sometimes with candidates passing a drug test. And with the legalization of marijuana, how should businesses be thinking about this? What are the risks of changing that up? How to address this? Anyone want to go first?
Well, we're just seeing a lot of organizations, and I'm not an HR compliance consultant or legal or anything like that, so talk to those people. But I am seeing a lot of my clients, they are changing which drugs they're testing for, and they're no longer testing for THC from marijuana, only the other drugs, because marijuana stays in your system for so long, and it does impact your liability insurance, likely, of what you're testing. But some of my organizations, particularly in states that have legalized marijuana use for both recreation and medicinal, they are calling that a cost of doing business and saying our insurance is just going to go up at this point and we have to focus on more important issues.
Is there any risk in industries where someone's operating heavy machinery or things like
Yes.
that? Would that, okay.
That's what I was going to
Yes.
say, because that's all we do: construction, trades, those kinds of things.
Yes.
Most of our clients, and I'm not a compliance person, my attorney has told me to give the disclaimer, just like Cara did. So I'm not the compliance expert, but I will tell you what we've seen is that most of our clients have actually said we are not willing to allow that, because of the risk of, because you can't tell. That's the downside with marijuana. You don't know if they smoked this morning or if they smoked 3 days ago. You can't tell. And so they're just saying blanket policy, we're not going to take the risk. So that's what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you everyone for sharing your insights. Cara, Ryan, and Susie, this was great to spend time with you. Very valuable insights. So thanks for being here. And for our attendees, we'll be sending a link to today's recording and slides via email within 24 hours. To help you with the issues most pressing, look for insights updated regularly in the CEO Pulse resource centers on both hiring and inflation on Vistage.com. On May 9th, you'll find a chair roundtable where Vistage Chief Research Officer Joe Galvin speaks to 3 esteemed Vistage chairs to share what CEOs in their groups are doing to address hiring challenges. And finally, for Vistage members, if you did not have the chance to watch the conversation with Indra Nooyi, former CEO and chairman of PepsiCo, exclusively for Vistage members, that recording is available through July 1. And in this dynamic conversation, Indra shares how to rethink the talent crisis as the great re-enrollment. You can find more information on that on My Vistage. Thank you so much for your time today, and be safe and be well.